In last week's episode of Severance, we got a deeper look into Mark and Gemma's backstory, and this time, the focus shifts to Harmony Cobel. We finally learn where she disappeared to after escaping what was likely a trap set by Helena Egan. Turns out, she was heading back to her childhood home, but is far from a warm welcome. This episode gives us a lot of insight into Cobel, where she grew up, what shaped her, and just how important she really is to Lumon. Cobel's hometown, Salt's Neck, was essentially a Lumon factory town, one of the many places that the company exploited for cheap labour. But Lumon has long since abandoned it, leaving the town in decay, populated by mostly an Asian and struggling community. There are strong real-world parallels here. So many towns, for example former mining towns in the UK, were built around a single industry. When those industries collapsed or moved elsewhere, they were left economically devastated. Visually, the cinematography in this episode was stunning. The cold, harsh landscapes perfectly captured the town's sense of loss and abandonment, adding to the eerie, desolate atmosphere. When Cobel arrives, she reconnects with an old chum, as she puts it, though he's not exactly thrilled to see her. She insists he takes her to her childhood home because she's searching for something. It's darkly ironic. She calls him an old colleague when in reality they were both victims of Lumon's child labour system, forced to work in their factories from a young age. At her former home, we meet her aunt Sissy, a deeply indoctrinated care fanatic who's even less pleased to see her. She already knows about Cobel's rebellion against Lumon, setting up some tense interactions. This is where we start to see Cobel in a new light, transforming from someone most viewers probably disliked into someone I think many will now sympathise with. We learn that Cobel was essentially a child prodigy in the Lumon factories. Her talent earned her a place in the Wintertide Fellowship Programme, the same one that Miss Wong is currently part of. Her backstory takes an even darker turn when we learn that her mother hated care and Lumon. Tragically, she died from an unspecified illness while Cobel was in the programme. Her aunt, who is probably the most vile character we've met in the show so far, blames her mother for her own death, further highlighting the twisted Lumon ideology. Eventually, Cobel finds what she was looking for: documents containing schematics and plans for circuit blueprint, base code, overtime contingency, and Glasgow block. If you haven't guessed it by now, what this means is that Harmony Cobel is the true creator of the Severance technology. This absolutely floored me. I knew Cobel was important, but I never expected her to be the mastermind behind Severance. But thinking about it now, it makes complete sense. Her obsession with Mark and Gemma, Lumon's fear of her, her belief in her own value, it all tracks. Even her background, a child labourer working in grueling conditions, it explains why she would create a system that shifts the burden of work onto someone else. It's a chilling revelation, but it makes her one of the most fascinating characters in the show. The episode ends on a moment that I think hints at what's coming next. After dodging Devon's calls all episode, Cobel finally answers and hears about Mark's reintegration. She immediately asks if Vagabi is responsible and seems shocked that Mark is still alive. When she gets on the phone with Mark, she tells him, "Tell me everything." I think this is a huge clue that Cobel might actually help Mark complete his reintegration safely. If there's anyone who understands the severance process better than Lumon, it's her. I said last week that Mark reintegrating properly is key to saving Gemma. Well, with Cobel on his side, that might be more possible than ever. Let me know your thoughts. Where do you think the show is heading going into the final 2 episodes?